Cap hell's a harsh term, but it's the difference between Pittsburgh winning a Stanley Cup this year and losing in the playoffs this year. And it's interesting because they don't have a first rounder this year. They have their own second. They have Ottawa's third rounder. They don't have their own. They don't have a fourth. They have 2 fifth-round draft picks. They have Detroit's fifth rounder on top of their own, and they have their own 6th and 7th-round draft picks. Now, when you look at what they have an excellent team. They have every reason to believe right now, their fandom, their coaches, the management, everybody, pundits, there's going to be people picking this team to win a Stanley Cup again next year. To win 3 out of 4 and become a true dynasty in an age where that doesn't happen. But there's the cap issue. And they're going to have to address that this summer. Malkin makes the top money, and I don't think anybody can argue against Malkin being a top money earner. But it sure looks good on Crosby that he's willing to take less money than somebody else on the team. Malkin $9.5 million for 4 more years. Crosby $8.7 million till 2025, so 7 more years. Crosby's not going anywhere. He will retire a Penguin. Kessel $6.8 million for 4 more years. Hornquist $5.3 million for 5 more years. Great. That's a good starting point. I don't have any problem with any of those contracts. But this is what happens when you're successful. Hagelin, $4 million. He's a UFA next summer. Connor Sheary, 2 more years, or Connor Sherry. 2 more. I call him Sheary. Mistake. It is Sherry. If you look it up, there's a video online where he explains it's Sherry, and the media is like, oh, okay. Connor Sherry, 2 more years at $3 million. That is the expense that you pay for a guy who scores on Crosby's wing. Brassard, $3 million for 1 more year. Does he then leave next summer? Does he stick around until the fall? Do they trade him out? Was he just a rental? And even though he's got a year left on his contract, they'll try to leverage him for something else. Riley Sheahan, restricted free agent this summer with arbitration rights. What's he worth? Do they keep him? Zach Aston Reese is an RFA next summer. He makes $925K this coming year. Jake Gensel's the big one, $734K for 1 more year, and then he's a restricted free agent next summer. Do you pay for regular season Jake Gensel or playoffs Jake Gensel? Because they seem to be 2 different creatures, and one could be very expensive indeed. Dominic Simone, restricted free agent with arbitration rights. How much is he worth? Is he another Sherry? Is he more talented, or is he just playing on the wing of Crosby and he's going to get rotated out at some point too? Brian Rust, how much is he worth? He's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights. Tom Kuhnhackl, restricted free agent with arbitration rights. What's he worth? And Carter Rowney's UFA this summer. Do they bother re-signing him? Do they let him go? Chris Letang, $7.25 million for 4 more years on that blue line. Is he worth that at this stage of the game? Justin Schultz, $5.5 million for 2 more years. Dumoulin, $4.1 million for 5 more years. Oli Mata, $4.083 million for 4 more years. Matt Hunwick, 2 more years at $2.5. I didn't like that contract when it was signed. I still don't. Jamie Alexiak's a restricted free agent this summer. How much is he worth to the team? Chad Ruedel, $650K for 1 more year, and then he's an unrestricted free agent. In net, Matt Murray, $3.75 million for 2 more years. Then he's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights. And Casey DeSmith, $675K for 1 more year, and then he's a UFA. There's an issue. If the cap goes up to $80 million next year, they have $9.7 million in cap space. They have a number of guys to re-sign, and then there's guys they're going to want to get signed for the following year. And they've got a lot of contracts up here that don't expire soon. Hagelin's $4 million comes off. Brassard's $3 million comes off. But almost anybody else has got a long-term contract. And this is the trick. See, you win a couple of Stanley Cups. And in some cases, it's just getting close to the cup. And you want to keep that team together. And because these guys play really well in the playoffs, it's going to inflate the amount of money you spend to keep that team together. It's going to make guys look probably better than what they really are. They're going to get this reputation as big game guys. So a guy who might be worth $3 million, maybe you give him 3.5, maybe you give him 4. And in Pittsburgh's case, I think because they have had a very good team and they've had a lot of success, now they're coming to crunch time. This blue line that we can all agree let them down against Washington, somebody would have to go. But look, 4 years, 2 years, 5 years, 4 years, 2 years. The top 5 are all locked in. Alexiak, if he's the number 6 guy, Does Hunwick get bought out? What do you do? Mata, Dumoulin, Schultz, Letang, I don't think any of those guys go anywhere. So what do you do? Pittsburgh's got some tough questions to answer this summer. For the first time in years, because when you don't win the Stanley Cup, these suddenly become tough questions. When you've won the Stanley Cup and you got a cap crunch, then you could say they're being punished for being a good team. Damn the cap. But when they lose and they got that cap problem, that's when Red Wings fans come in and say, it's not just us. And when you look at their prospects, they have issues here too. Padan they picked up from the Canucks for Pouliot. I'm putting him on the board because Andre Padan, I think, can be a number 7 guy. That's about his ceiling, though. He's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights. Do they even qualify him? Tobias Lindbergh, do they qualify him? He had 10 goals at Wilkes-Barre this year. Daniel Sprong, he's a restricted free agent this summer. What's he worth? We don't know. We haven't seen him at the NHL level yet. Tristan Jarry's a restricted free agent. What's he worth? Are you keeping him in the lineup or are you keeping just Smith? And Josh Juris is a UFA walking away, or do they need him in the lineup because they're going to need to trade somebody else out and are they going to re-sign him? In the most recent Future Watch issue brought out by Hockey News, you can take it with a grain of salt, but when they rate prospect pools, and that includes players already on the roster or 25 years and younger, or 23 and younger, Pittsburgh's 31st. They're dead last, and that's part of what happens too. So you've got the twin problems of your team's doing really well, so you're going to have to pay a lot to keep it together, and because they're doing really well, you're going to draft later, or you're giving up draft picks to bring in rentals to prop up the team and go for another Stanley Cup, and eventually you have a highly paid team and not a lot of top-end talent coming in to replace guys. It's going to be an issue for Pittsburgh as soon as this summer. If they're going to be proactive, if Jim Rutherford's going to be proactive, you want to fix that this summer. And it might involve getting some guys off the roster, but it's going to be tricky. And there's not going to be anybody coming out of this year's draft for them to help shore things up either. They would have drafted 22nd overall. That 22nd draft pick now belongs to the Ottawa Senators, who also draft 4th. So Ottawa could really turn things around with this year's draft. So we'll see what they do. It'll be interesting to see what they do because they're trying to build to a 3rd Stanley Cup in 4 years. They do not view themselves as retooling, and nor should they. They lost in the second round after two back-to-back Stanley Cups. There's no reason to look at this as a retool when you've still got Crosby, Malkin, Kessel, Hornqvist, and others. But it's the and others part that they're going to have to figure out who they keep, who they trade, and that's going to make a big difference as to whether or not they do get that 3rd cup in 4 years, or if a year from now we're looking at another exit from the playoffs for the Penguins and saying it might be time to look into a retool. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Do not forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.